So good morning and welcome to Macmillan Specialist Cars. Today we are working on a Carrera GT. It's been a while since I've seen a Carrera GT, let alone work on one. But I have been fortunate enough in my youth to be involved in the launch of it at its early stages at Porsche in Reading, at training. So initially it was as many of you will probably know, it started off probably a footwork F1 engine, which initially was a V12 designed by Metzger, and it was virtually as Porsche would do and have been known to do in the past, two sixes at it bolted together. But it was heavy and it was unreliable, and so they built the engine for the footwork Arrows team, and at that stage there was lots of manufacturers in Formula One, not just a handful, and you could come along with whatever you had and designed a car and done some racing. But the Porsche engine, the V12, heavy, unreliable, hard in fuel, and it really wasn't a success. So they had this engine sitting and they tried different things with it, and they eventually decided in the motorsport factory, or not factory, the motorsport department decided, right, we want to cut two cylinders off it, we want to make a V10, 5.7. They have done 5.7s before, but mostly V8s, 928. And, but this was a V10 for the first time. And they felt that it would be suitable for Le Mans, LMP, Le Mans prototype racing, or Le Mans racing in those days. So they built some development cars, tried it out at Le Mans, but the budget wasn't there, but they still had this engine sitting. So it wasn't a big plan of Porsche's to build the Carrera GT, but it was the motorsport department did most of the building and designing of it. So they decided to use this V10 in the Carrera. This is what we now know as the Carrera GT. Unlike the 959, the 959 was probably more advanced, well, a lot more advanced as regards to the transmission, because you had a transverse and longitudinal diff locks. This is just a two-wheel drive V10. So it's a light car, wouldn't have had, it's more, what would you say, a driver's car, rear-wheel drive only, very lightweight. It had to make, the way finances were going with Porsche at the time, the finance in those years was very tight, and they weren't going terribly well as a company. So they had to make money. No longer, as per the 959, every 959 that was sold, Porsche lost money on. Whereas the Carrera GT, they were told from the beginning, the head man at Porsche at the time, they were told, right, this thing has to make us money, otherwise it won't be produced. So it just wasn't going to be a loss leader. It had to make it stand on its own 2 feet. So they produced it, and I was lucky enough in the early days to see the launch of the footwork F1 car at Porsche in Reading. And so initially that was the original engine. So it does have link to Formula One. And I was also fortunate enough to be over at Reading, where they would have had some Carrera GTs in the workshop. The big problem at that stage with the Carrera, well, it wasn't a big problem, but one of the issues they had with Carrera GTs in the early days was it uses a basket type clutch, very, very lightweight. I think it's 6.7 inches in diameter, multi-plate clutch. One of the first production cars to use a dry multi-plate clutch. And those clutches, the advantage of that clutch was, it was like something they would use in Formula One. It was able to lower, you were able to keep the engine lower, so for a very low center of gravity in the car. and the clutch, the small clutch diameter allowed it to do that. The issue was you could burn it out reasonably quickly. To be fair, once the owners got the cars, the clutches didn't burn out. But there was a bit of a while where a lot of them were coming into GB with burnt out clutches. And this is unofficial, but it did seem to be that the transport drivers loading the cars onto the lorries could very easily burn out a Carrera GT clutch just putting it onto the lorry. So that was the thought for a long time, was what was happening to these clutches. So that was a common thing in the early days. Porsche denied this and didn't do, and well, officially they didn't say much about it, but for some reason, all of a sudden the clutches didn't burn out anymore. Transport drivers are not. So the clutch is now reliable, and probably this car here is really good. It's the only issue with it has been, not issue with this car, but in general, there's been one major recall on bolts that hold on the wishbones, and some of the bolts were corroding. So there was a recall on wishbone bolts for the rose joints that connect the rose joints to the tub. This car's had that work already done, and so it's in with us getting some small items, bits and pieces done to it. So just that you know you've got a Carrera GT, it says GT on your key. One of the great things about it, which I really like, is it's old school, as I said, and it's got a proper door handle. There's no fancy flaps or anything else. It's got a proper handle. So once you're in the car, you've also got a proper throwback to the 917, the ultimate Porsche in many, many people's eyes. And you've got the key, the ignition barrel on the left-hand side, and you've got the gear lever on the right. Not only is it the gear lever on the right, it's a wooden gear lever, a real throwback to the 917. And the reason you have the ignition on the left and the gear lever on the right is so that whenever you're doing Le Mans 24 hours and you did the traditional running start to get into the car, you were able to do two things at once: start the car and select first gear. There's lots of hidden compartments. And in here, at the back of each door, we have hidden departments for luggage, for not much luggage, mind you, in that, but in the other door as well, there's hidden compartments for umbrellas or whatever. So what's funny about this is whenever you get into it, it's very familiar to many Boxster owners, 986 owners, because you have the analog dials and you have the row of warning lights across the bottom. One of the other odd things with the Carrera GT, we have different size wheels. We have 19s in the front and we have 20s in the rear. But we also have red locking wheel nuts, center lock wheels on the left-hand side and blue ones on the right. Really nicely lined boot with an unusual shape. It's really not going to carry much luggage in it, because what it's actually designed for is for the two roof panels to come apart separately, and they lie sideways on top of one another in the boot area. Here's our lock and wheel nut key. What we also have, as many of our Porsche owners know, we normally have the build sticker on the interior of the boot lid, but on the Carrera GT it's in below a flap in the boot, stuck on the boot, and stuck in part of the chassis of the car. And it's just, it's familiar to us all, WPO, treble Z. In this case it's 98Z4, and this time it's got L, which is very rare for Leipzig, and then the specific chassis number. So it's nice to be able to see that. It's still got a Porsche sticker on, even though it's a very small build, very limited run. It still has the proper factory sticker. One of the really nice things about this car while I've been working at it is that in our workshop here, each mechanic has their own colour of touch-up pencil. And what that's used for is as they're building an engine or a gearbox or fitting a suspension component, if they've torqued that item, they put a line on the nut or the bolt to remind them firstly that they've torqued it. And secondly, if they're doing a quality check on the car, they can look at every nut, and if there's a line on it, it means that nut's been tightened correctly and it's been torqued up. And it's lovely on this car that whoever has worked in this in the past, every single nut has a white mark or a blue mark on it. So it's probably two different people. But there's blue marks on some nuts and bolts, and there's white marks on every one of the rest of them. And that's every suspension component, because this vehicle has had the recall done for the wishbone bolts. And it's just a sign of great workmanship and taking care of this car. As you've seen in the doors, there's hidey holes here and there. Same in the engine bay. We have the warning triangle on this side. So on the passenger side in the engine bay, we have the toolkit in another hidey hole. So as you can see again here, extensive use of paint on every single nut, every single bolt on the vehicle. And what's unusual as well, if you look closely at the front and rear suspension, there's no shock absorber, because they're using a push rod or a pull rod, which is in the center of the wishbones, which goes up through to the transverse shock absorbers. And as you can see here, even the arms on the wishbones are aerodynamic. So one of the great things we have here, which I really thoroughly enjoy, is Porsche's aerodynamics, especially for brake cooling. And it's something they've been really, really good at all their years. So we have lots of ducts in the front bumper for air to come in. We have ducts in the underbody for air to get in to this wheel arch or wheel well area. And it's all designed to dissipate heat from the brakes. Even to the extent of, if you look at the inside of the wheel, there's no wheel well. Or if there is a wheel well, which there has to be ultimately a wheel well of some sort, but there's no big lip of a wheel well. It's a very long stretch from the inner part of the rim to the outer rim, and it's very smooth. So that was one of the first things that Porsche have done to improve their brakes, is the design of the wheels. So you'll find that all genuine Porsche wheels have a very, very well hidden well. So really we need the well to be able to take the tyre off the rim. We need somewhere for the other end of the bead to go into to allow us to take the tyre off the rim. The one thing that we found over the years was whenever customers, not on Carrera GTs, but Porsches in general, if they didn't particularly like the wheel that was on the car, the wheel that it came with, they would buy aftermarket wheels. And without exception, the aftermarket wheels had a well, the old traditional well, somewhere on the rim. And the issues we had was that the customers were saying these brakes are squealing all the time, or it's going through brake pads constantly. These brake pads aren't lasting very long. And the one thing we knew in that case was all we had to do was go outside and look at the car, how dirty it was. Because a car with the incorrect wheel fitted was always dirty up the side. And that's because normally with the proper Porsche wheel, the air pushes the brake dust and dirt into the hedge, away from the vehicle. Whereas the ones with a non-standard rim trapped the air inside the wheel arch area, and that dirt then just covered the side of the car. So in conclusion, that's us talking about our Carrera GT. Hope you've enjoyed it. we're going to have it out here for a few days doing bits and pieces to it, and it's a pretty thing to have.